right. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to Community Conversations with Dan Noyes and Kate Donnally. Sadly, Senator Rich Westman cannot join us this month, but he promises to be back next month. So we will have time this morning. It's great to see you all here. Thanks. Many of you are regulars, and we really appreciate you coming every month. It's really fun to have an opportunity to connect. So I will sort of spare a longer intro since so many of you have been here before, I think everyone in fact, but some folks do apparently watch on YouTube. We got like 38 views last month. So I just want to say this for people who are watching from their homes. A little intro. So we meet the fourth Saturday of the month throughout the legislative session from 9 to 10 in the morning via Zoom. The hope and intent is to just create a relaxed, open setting to have communication among our community members and ourselves. And our hope is to, as I said before, create a safe and welcoming space. And so we hope that anyone who attends and participates can honor that spirit, and that we can engage in a respectful manner with one another, which, as I've said many times, has not yet been an issue at all. So we really appreciate your participation. Sometimes we invite someone from the community to come and speak. We don't have anyone formally today that is here to speak about some of the work they're doing. I will say that as of right now, next month, Emily Rosenbaum intends to join us to talk a little bit about the Working Communities Challenge, which is a pretty large grant that we received in Lemoore County that's doing a lot of really innovative work around workforce issues. And so she's going to talk a little bit about the work that they are doing. And that'll, as folks have seen, that's, she'll take 5 to 10 minutes to talk about their work. And you're welcome to ask any questions, and then we'll kind of dig into the other Q&A part. Last time, I did not give Dan or Rich or myself an opportunity to talk much about what we're doing in our own committee work, and so I might take a little time in the beginning today to just give some space for that, and then we'll open things up for just question and answer, whatever you guys have on your minds. So I will just say again, if you have a question as we're talking or anything, feel free to shoot up your little Zoom hand. You are also welcome for folks in the Zoom meeting to put things in the chat if you want to just sort of record a question. I keep track of that during our discussion as well. So whatever works best for you. And then I will pause there. Dan, I don't know if you want to start us off just by introducing yourself, and then maybe just talk a little bit about, what you guys have going on in your committee and whatever's on your mind.
Glad to. Welcome, everybody. So yeah, as you all know, I serve on the Human Services Committee, Dan Noyes. So since last time we had our meeting, we've actually worked on a couple of bills. One of them is a bill to really look at how individuals with developmental disabilities have access to housing and care, and we really did a deep dive into how we provide services, and then also looking at long-term. There's a lot of individuals whose caregivers are their parents who are aging, and what does our system of care look like as they will move into, maybe their parents passed on or cannot provide that same level of care that they need. So we looked at setting up some different models for housing as these individuals move forward, because we're going to have to come up with a plan. So that is one bill that we're working on. We actually passed it out of committee. It has to go to Appropriations and a couple other committees before it goes to the floor, which will be after the town meeting break. Mostly for the last couple of weeks, we've been really digging into the budget. I've got the Family Services Division with Representative Paiella out of Londonderry, and we're looking at how the state allocates funds for youth in foster care. Also, how when an individual ages out of foster care, what supports and services or wraparound services are available to that individual. And then also like foster care rates and how much people are paid to have respite, so that if they need a break from the person that the child that they're caring from. So we looked at some budget numbers around that and parts of the programs that really have been systemically underfunded for years and years, and tried to allocate some more money to them. So we put together what's called a budget letter from the Human Services Committee to the Appropriations Committee. And it talks about just what are our, where do we see deficiencies in the proposed budget from the governor's administration, from the executive branch. So we went through that, got that out of our committee. So, and there's actually, wasn't part of the budget that I'm directly involved with, but I worked with Representative Wood on looking at how we provide care to older Vermonters. And in the governor's budget, he provided a 3% increase for home and community-based providers. And I think we know that if you look at residential care facilities, adult day providers, home health agencies, they're really struggling with making sure that their staff, they have retention, they can compete, they can hire new individuals to work there. And, I think the day of people working for $12 an hour providing care to individuals in their home is gone. And we need to figure out a funding model that works to be able to make sure people that need this level of care in their home or in the community have it. For example, the adult days, pretty much we've been reimbursing them around $12.50 an hour for working there, and they've been really having trouble keeping staff, and 3 of them went out of business. So it's Rutland and Wells River and down in Barry. So, we're trying to figure out how to make sure that they have that funding they need to be able to provide respite care and a place for older Vermonters to go. We recommended a 10% increase, whereas the governor recommended a 3% increase, but we're just trying to even get them to $20 an hour for a lot of these care providers. And hopefully we can find some common ground in the budget. It's not cheap. A 1% increase is about, I think it's about $1.8 million per 1%, but that's matched through Medicaid. So that works out to about $4 million for each 1% increase into the home and community-based providers. And then what the problem we're going to run into is that the Medicaid match, global commitment, has a cap. So Vermont only can have so much Medicaid money flowing into our state. Once we reach that cap, then we can't go, we don't get that match. And so then we have to go it alone, and we just don't have the tax base to really look at when you start talking about hundreds of millions of dollars to prop up home and community-based providers. It doesn't quite work. So I guess the other bill that I'll touch on real quick is state of Vermont is getting quite a bit of money. We just heard in the news from the opioid settlement, where the manufacturers of opioids and the distributors have come to an agreement with a bunch of states. It's billions of dollars to help us deal with the aftermath of the individuals who now have opioid use disorder or substance use disorder from the overprescribing of the opioids. So we're looking at how that money will be allocated out to the community and out to the different service providers, whether it's the recovery centers or Jenna's Promise and Johnson. It's very structured. This obviously it's a legal settlement. So we have to create a structure that meets the legal settlement. And one of the things that they actually have in there is because a lot of the country is more county-based than town-based, like we have. We have town government and not a lot of county government, but other states have a lot of county government. So we're trying to figure out how to make the Vermont model work with the federal, with this settlement money. So anyways, that's a bill that we'll be working on when we get back from the legislative break or from the town meeting break. So I'm glad to take any questions on it, or actually, Kate, I'll turn it back over to you. Talk about what's going on in your world.
Yeah, well, I'll pause there just for a minute if there's any sort of immediate questions, and then, like you guys know, we'll open it up broader. But any just initial questions about any of the info that? Nothing immediate. Like I said, feel free to drop questions in the chat if you're worried you're going to forget them, or raise your hand if you have anything on your mind.
Actually,
yeah,
I just wanted to bring up one more thing that I should have written down on my notes, just came to my mind. So every week on Wednesday, you probably heard me talk about this, I run the Older Vermonters Caucus, where I bring individuals, legislators, advocates together, and we really try to dig into the question, into the issues that affect older Vermonters. And we have each week it's a different topic, and we decided to along this opioid settlement money, along the funding for recovery centers, look at addiction and substance use disorder, what the state's doing for older Vermonters, and really not doing as much as we need to be doing. So in committee, we're looking at how we can fix some of these problems. So it was nice to see something that we've been really looking at in the caucus, kind of come back into our committee where we can try to answer those and fix those concerns. So anyways, just something that came to mind.
Thank you for adding that. For those who don't know, in Dan Noyes, you have one of the harder working members of the Vermont State Legislature. So Dan does a lot and knows a lot of information. So we're very lucky to have Dan.
Thanks. Lucky to be here.
I have a quick question.
I'm
sure this shows my lack of information and knowledge, but I'm just curious as to the settlement money you're talking about, of course, would have to come from like prescription drugs and things like that, the problem. Do we know what percent of the substance disorder problems come under that heading, and which are from some other source?
Oh, you mean the funding sources where we're getting the money?
Yeah, yes, I assume that. Is there some kind of, are they trying to separate out people who have a problem due to prescription drugs as directly from a medical?
Actually, no. We're actually going to be able to really use this a lot for our recovery centers, which deal with everything from alcohol to opioids. So the money is definitely coming from the opioid settlement, but it's going into the Department of Health ADAP, which is the Alcohol and Drug Division, part of the Population Health Department of Health. And will be allocated out to education programs, prevention, recovery, and treatment programs. So it will kind of go across everything. It's considerably more money than this department has had. But it's spread out through years, like I think 15 years comes to mind. So like the tobacco settlement money, we use a lot of that for just prevention money in our schools.
So it doesn't matter how you contracted the problem. They'll be able to take care of everybody.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Thanks for that question. And please, there are no silly questions. There's so much that we're all trying to figure out all the time with these issues. So always feel free to ask. I can give a brief rundown of where things are at in my committee work. So as folks may know, I am on the Judiciary Committee, which I really enjoy. It is, in my experience, it's sort of a unique committee. I feel like sometimes I describe it as almost a little bit of an island. You know, I think a lot of committees, as Dan was describing, a lot of their work is tied in with the budget. And that's not always the case for the Judiciary Committee. In fact, often it's a very, very small period of time we spend on the budget. And the majority of time is looking at policy related to how our judicial system works. So we started off this year sort of setting the tone a bit for this session with a presentation by the Council of State Governments, which is a national organization that supports state governments. So they provide a lot of support in providing policy research and information and things that, you know, as a citizen legislature, we can't do. And so one of the areas that they've been looking into, they called it sort of Justice Reinvestment Initiative, but essentially it's looking at across the country, but they contracted to do a specific study in Vermont looking at racial disparities in the criminal justice system. One of the things that's been really challenging is we have known anecdotally for a long time that this is something that we likely struggle with, but as you'll hear in pretty much every area of state government you sort of explore, we have a real struggle with gathering data. We have some really old infrastructure in that area. I think in recent years, this has become a priority, is really enhancing our technology in state government and developing and accessing and utilizing new services that allow us to track information much more easily so that policymakers can have access to actual concrete data around, you know, who is getting pulled over and what is happening to folks once that happens, and who is showing up in front of the courts and who is getting incarcerated and who isn't. And so essentially the Council of State Governments, as we in the state are working on solutions to that problem, which I can get back to in a minute, basically contracted to say, we'll try to do some of that work for you. And they spent the last couple of years digging into data in Vermont around racial disparities, and came back with some pretty concerning numbers that just sort of affirmed what we knew already, including the fact that they, and I am not a statistician, so I'm not going to pretend to know the fancy language that they use to describe this, but essentially they can go through the data and discern, you know, how much of this difference is correlated to whether the person sort of lives in Vermont or doesn't, right? So one of the things that comes up when we talk about racial disparities in Vermont's criminal justice system is there are many folks who sort of wonder, like, well, is that people coming in from out of state? And what the data told us, so this is the kind of thing that they can sort of control for in their study, is like, how much of this has to do with people coming in from out of state? How much of this has to do with previous criminal history? And what they found, those are the two sort of factors that they controlled for in their study. And they found that regardless of where the person resides and regardless of their past criminal history, there is a clear disparity in how Black Vermonters are being treated in their interactions with our criminal justice system and white Vermonters. So they laid out some recommendations, and I'm just naming all this because, again, it sort of set the table a little bit for some of the policy work that we've been doing throughout the year. So one of the things that they highlighted is that one of the primary areas that these disparities show up is in how we are approaching drug crimes, essentially. And this sort of launches us into this whole other area, which is that we have a really serious challenge right now with how we are addressing substance use and misuse in our state and in our community. And so coupled with Council of State Governments has been research presented in testimony on essentially the failures of the war on drugs. And so looking at how are we addressing this in the courts, there's a couple of areas that we're trying to address this. So one is there was a decriminalization bill that was presented, and some really great testimony was taken where essentially low levels of possession would have been decriminalized and treated as a civil penalty, where someone would then have point of access to an assessment or screening for substance use. So much like how we sort of approach, like right now, if a young person is caught drinking, they sort of have this avenue where they can access counseling. And in exchange, they have nothing on their record. So it was sort of, this is also a similar model to what was adopted in Oregon. Essentially, that got sort of tabled for now, but what was taken from that bill and is likely to move forward is an advisory panel that's from the Department of Health. Well, there's many people on the advisory panel, but essentially it's shifting the discussion of possession amounts from the legal system to the public health system. And so we would have an advisory panel that would sort of help define what are actual amounts of substances that are deemed, for personal use, much like we did with cannabis. And from there, the idea is when we can start to get more clarity around these things, and we can start to build policy that can differently impact people based on, if they're using substances for personal use as opposed to, trafficking substances, essentially. So there's that piece. It's sort of how are we working with substance use in the criminal justice system. The other piece, which is also tied in with workforce, is looking at expungement and sealing. A lot of testimony taken on the impacts of having a criminal record, even sort of mild, seemingly small misdemeanors on your record, and the lasting impact that can have on people's access to work, employment, significant impact on finances, mental health, long-term impacts, which stress our public health system, et cetera, et cetera. So there's been a long process of trying to figure out how do we, once someone has satisfied their sentence and then, had a few years beyond that of demonstrating that they can be in the community in a safe manner, how do we sort of relieve them of the burden of this criminal history, this record? So happy to answer any questions about that, but that's the other piece we're working on. A couple things beyond that, we have an adoption bill that we're working on right now, which would help people who are adopted to receive access to their primary vital records, which for folks in the world of adoption is a very big deal. For folks who don't know much about adoption, that might not sound like much, but we've heard a lot of testimony, passionate testimony on this issue. The other thing that we have been looking at that I'm not sure will move right now, but just to kind of flag for folks and in case you're interested, one is looking at the age of marriage in Vermont and shifting the age of marriage up to 18 for a variety of reasons I won't go into too much right now, but if it's an area you're interested in, please let me know because I'm sort of curious to hear community feedback on this. And the other is looking at the impact of incarceration on children. So there are, I don't have the data in front of me, but a lot of Vermont children have a parent who's incarcerated, and the impact that this has on young people is pretty devastating. And so looking at, there's a bill in the works that I'm working pretty closely on that would sort of give defendants and the defendant's family a right to provide an assessment essentially to the court that outlines the role that this defendant plays in the life of a child. And then the court would then take that into account in sentencing, which is not done currently. Anyway, there's a lot. We'll pause there. Any immediate questions about that? We're going to open things up for general Q&A, but I'll just pause for a minute in case anyone has any questions about what I was just talking.
Hey, Kate, this is Bill Bruner calling.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, in regards to this, I guess you refer to it as racial disparity. Sounds to me like people are being treated differently for the same crime based on the color of their skin. That seems to be what's happening here in the last year, especially in the Burlington area. What can you say to that?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think part of what we're trying to figure out, and if in the end of what I say I don't fully answer your question, let me know, but part of what the study was trying to start doing was figuring out sort of where are these disparities sort of cropping up. So there's lots of points of intersection with the criminal justice system. There's a point where the law enforcement interacts with a person. There's a point where someone shows up in front of a court. There's a point where sentencing occurs. And they're trying to figure out, like, where in this process are there areas in this process that are more significantly producing disparities? And what they found is that is true, that there are certain areas that are particularly disparate, so traffic stops, but who is showing up in front of the court is one of them, which they want to break that down further. This gets to my other thing that I do want to make sure I say. The other is, like, it looks like people aren't necessarily being, once you're being charged with a crime, so there's a disparity in who's being charged, but there's not a disparity necessarily in whether they're like convicted of that crime, but there is a disparity once sentencing occurs in terms of who's being incarcerated and who isn't. So if two people have the same crime, there's not necessarily a difference in, like, with the evidence there's not necessarily a difference in, like, who is ultimately being found sort of guilty, but once they are found guilty, the punishment that's being applied for that crime is different based on the color of the person's skin. Based on the research, when they strip away all these other factors. So, you know, I don't know, Bill, I don't know if that sort of, well, I will say one more thing and then make sure I answered your question. So one of the things that's clear is that, like, we want to figure out how can we develop policy that reduces the potential for this. And I talked about data and the struggles around data. So one of the primary bills that I can't believe I forgot to mention that we're working on is the creation of a Department of Racial Justice Statistics that would exist within the Office of Racial Equity that was developed over the last couple of years. And so this would bring on statisticians who would have the capacity to launch into the data in the criminal justice system and really get a sense of, like, what is happening where, and how can we develop policy to sort of create more universal outcomes. So I'll stop there, Bill. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, I might make a suggestion that, and I thought about this for a while. The crime of, say, looting. There should be a published penalty for all our crimes, so that everybody knows this is what's going to happen to you if you do this or that, irrespective of whether that person is black or white or brown. This is the penalty for this particular crime. Let's publish that so that they know ahead of time that this is what they're going to get. I mean, unfortunately, there is too much discretion and politics involved with meting out punishments. I mean, right now, for the past year, this no bail stuff has created a serious civility problem in Burlington. You know, between defunding the police and then letting these people out without bail, it's just, it's a system that's not working.
Yeah, thanks for your comments. And one of the things that I do think there's, that you said that stands out that we are looking at from a policy perspective is Vermont does not have clear classifications of crimes right now. So it's all over the map. And so that is one of the areas of recommendation is clear classification system. And we are, that's part of what we're working on right now. It's also true that like over 95% of crimes are pled out. So there's a huge amount of discretion among states' attorneys of how crimes are addressed, and that's something that we're trying to figure out as well. I'm gonna pause there. I see some other hands. I just want to make sure that other folks have an opportunity to chat. Casey, I think I saw your hand go up first.
Mine's a different question, so I'll wait till after.
Okay, sure. Well, I'm gonna pause on my topic for a moment, and let's open things up for general Q&A. And if anyone has questions about any of the things I just mentioned, we can include that in the Q&A. So, Casey, go ahead.
Okay, very specific question about Medicare reimbursement, which is that we found, I was shocked to find that people on Medicare can't get reimbursed for the free at-home antigen tests that are now available to everybody through emergency, declaration and law, right? And it was explained to me finally that years ago, Medicare, one of the sort of structural rules was that at-home tests can't be, aren't covered, not covered. And Blue Cross Blue Shield, our provider, is very well aware that this is, in fact, kind of a gap or an omission or a problem. That's really the point. And so Blue Cross Blue Shield anyway says, well, they're considering, quote unquote, finding a way to get around that and cover these tests. But I know this is a federal question, really, but Dan, do you know anything from the health field about what the discussion is and any possible action on this?
Yeah, I don't. I'm sorry. I would be glad to kind of reach out to my contact at Blue Cross and talk to them. There's a lot of federal regulations around Medicare and Medicaid that just leaves you scratching your head, and you're like, why? This is like pretty easy to fix. So yeah, I don't know what processes created that. I don't know why, but it's interesting that they said they're looking into how they can take care of it. So
yeah, well, I mean, right. It seems like such an obvious thing that ought to be, because it's limited in time span. That bill covers only about 4 months.
Yeah. And for example, if you show up having overdosed on opioids, you need prior authorization from your insurance provider to be able to get on Suboxone, which can take time. And so we're like, well, you can see from your own internal documents that an individual who is prescribed Suboxone or gets onto buprenorphine or whatever is and has that interaction with a physician that can help them because they're asking for help for recovery. You can see that there's a better success of their survival, and they still have a waiting period, or it's prior authorization. So sometimes that can be a very short amount of time. Sometimes we heard that can be longer, but there's actually, so anyways, above my pay grade, but glad to look into it for you.
Yeah, if you could just check you've got a better connection with what's really going on at Blue Cross Blue Shield than most of us. So if you could just check on folks' behalf and put out some info, and that would be grand. That would be really helpful. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Casey. And yeah, you are you are not alone in your concern about this. I've heard others talk about it too, so we'll try to get a little more information about that. I want to jump over to Andrea. You had put that you have a question in the chat, so Diana, you'll go next after Andrea. Go ahead.
Hi. Okay. Not sure if you all can hear me. I am on my cell with a headphone, but let me know if you can't. I have questions for both you, Kate, and Dan. Kate, you're in the Judiciary Committee, and there's a bill H-148, and it is in regards to eliminating the religious exemption for vaccinations. Very concerned about this bill and how it infringes on our right to health, freedom, and bodily autonomy. And I'm wondering if you've read that bill or if you have any information. Is that coming off the wall in your committee before crossover?
I have not looked closely at that bill. I can tell you that it will not be coming off the wall before crossover.
Okay, that's helpful. I represent quite a large number of Lamoille County people, constituents of both yours, Dan's, and Senator Westman. And so I'm sort of the pioneer spokesperson on this, but there is a large group of us who are extremely concerned. So I will make sure to send that out in an email that it will probably not be coming off the wall before crossover, which essentially just fill me in if I'm wrong on this. So does that mean the bill is dead or it stays on the wall for the next round, like next year?
Dan can help me out on this, but I
Sure,
think
glad
I think with the biennium, it closes out at the end of the year. Is that accurate, Dan?
At the end of the year, all the bills on the wall will go away. In terms of a bill not being acted upon after crossover, we can act on, the legislature can act on bills at any point. Whether or not the other body will take them up is a different story. I had two bills that passed out of committee right before crossover, and the Senate still hasn't acted on them. But, you know, they're generally, House bills are all acted on within, once we pass the budget out of the House, they go to the Senate. And then after crossover, we're kind of looking at Senate bills in the House, and the House is looking at, I'm sorry, the House is looking at Senate bills, the Senate is looking at House bills. But I mean, we've taken up bills, House bills, right like in the last week of the session, and passed them, and they've gone to the Senate, and the Senate has passed them.
Okay, great. And then the other question I have is for Dan. Sorry,
Sure.
Kate, were you interjecting something?
I was just going to clarify that, just given what Dan was just sharing, I'll just clarify that I do not believe that that bill is a priority of the Judiciary Committee this year. And I don't anticipate that it would come off. I can't make promises, you know, it would be the choice of the chair, but I feel like it's unlikely that it will move.
That's reassuring. There's a large group of us who very much believe that religious freedom is one of our constitutional rights. And so we would like to make sure that our legislators are standing up for our right for freedom of choice. Dan, and then in your committee, there's actually Bill H-283 that protects bodily autonomy. I know we've spoken in the past, you thought it probably wasn't going to make it off the wall. And again, I just wanted to know if you thought it was going to make it off the wall before crossover. No.
We're done with the bills that we're going to be taking action on in our committee, and there's actually a couple on the wall around vaccinations, and as far as I know, nothing is going to change.
Okay, that's reassuring. And I had spoken with Senator Westman, and he wasn't 100% clear on the crossover date. I think just because where we were on the phone, he didn't have his calendar. But is that March 11th, or when exactly is crossover happening?
When we pass the budget, in the House.
Oh, that's why he didn't know for sure. Okay.
It's not a set date, and it's actually not even a rule. It's just an agreement between the House and the Senate. It could be at any point, as soon as the House passes the budget. And I guess years ago, there was no such thing as crossover. So it just kind of organically grew out of being an agreement between the House and the Senate. Yeah. So it's when we pass the budget, which should be the first week we get back.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, I just want to thank you both for your efforts and really standing up for the people in your region and your district, and also just the people in the state of Vermont. And I really do think that this is an unprecedented time in our history, and it's really important for our constitutional rights to be protected. And so I really appreciate you both working towards that cause.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. And this is one of those examples where these meetings are so helpful. Like, I didn't know the history of crossover. Still, some of these like house customs are total mystery to me. I'm like, I don't think things can move. Oh, they can move anytime? Okay, I don't know. I just, I'm here, just learning. So, Diana, you here with us?
Yeah, I'm here. I just realized I was unmuted, and I hope I haven't been the whole time. Did you just do that?
No.
No,
No, I'm like a strict muter. So if people are making noise, I quiet you quickly. So no stress.
Okay. I was going to just listen today, and then I just kept seeing or hearing this theme come up, and I felt compelled to make an observation, which is, and also kind of in response to things that I've been reading in the paper when I get the updates from each of y'all in the News and Citizen about what's happening at the moment. And it seems to me like there's this thing that's happening where there's so much pitting one group against another, or one need against another, or, this committee is, trying to get as much money as they can away from this other committee. And I know we learned the dangers of, not staying in your lane. When somebody who's not an expert in something tries to tell somebody who is an expert in something how to do their business differently. So I'm definitely not advocating that. But what I guess I'm hopeful about, at least in the middle of the night when I can't sleep and the world is, so messed up, that maybe there's some hope there that, we can each like stay on our own lane in this like multi-lane highway and work together towards some common goal instead of, having to compete for such limited resources. And you guys were kind enough to let me speak at length about the EMS situation last time we had this gathering. And what I guess I'm feeling now is that was just kind of an island. Like you were talking about your committee being an island, and you can't help but see in the police blotter how much overlap there is between police and mental health, and between mental health and substance abuse, and between physical health and things like reimbursement for COVID tests. And, each of the things that somebody's talked about tonight overlaps with it, or today, it's not night. Each of the things that somebody's talked about overlaps with something else that somebody else has talked about. And I guess I just want your observation on that insight that came to me, that our only chance of anything ever working out is if people collaborate more. And, we embed mental health workers with police, not defund police. I'm not necessarily saying that, but I'm saying look at reallocation of resources, because maybe there'd be some efficiency in economy if everyone was working together to the same goal instead of fighting against each other for the limited money.
Kate, would you like to start?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'll just start by, saying I appreciate those comments, and I hear you. I mean, it is very difficult. I think historically our financial streams have been really siloed, and it's and resources, in the grand scheme of things, are limited. And I do think it's created situations where, coupled with our values as a society sort of, shifting over time, I think it's created scenarios where departments and entities that support vulnerable people are put in positions of having to compete with one another for resources, and it does not serve anyone very well as far as I'm concerned. I definitely think the answers are much harder to come by, but I can tell you that just, in spirit and the work that I am doing, that's very much on my mind, is how do we break down those silos and just build really good systems that support people effectively. So I'll stop there. Dan, I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I think we do work pretty well together. The committee different committees work with their legislative partners in the Appropriations Committee. So we have a citizen legislature. We have no staff. It's just Dan or just Kate. I mean, I got to kind of figure out this and talk to my colleagues. And so I have to have relationships with people on judiciary, people on transportation, people on ag, so that I can try to understand the bigger picture. And then in terms of the finances, the Appropriations Committee reaches out to the committees of jurisdiction to say, hey, I'm a citizen legislator too. I work January to May, and you're the expert. You're the one sitting in committee all day taking testimony on, Blue Cross Blue Shield, reimbursement rates for Medicare, Medicaid, and all of the different human services aspects. Or they might go to ag and say, hey, what's going on the farms, And so we have our contact person at the House Appropriations Committee. So like Dave Iacovone has, the Dale budget. Kimberly Jessup has DCF budget. And so, they rely on us to work with them to help understand the bigger picture. And then we all try to work together to come to some sort of an agreement. I think if you look at the votes on the budget, they're almost unanimous. Like when the House puts out their budget, it's pretty much a unanimous vote. Once in a while, someone will vote no, but typically, they're overwhelmingly passed either on a roll call or by a voice vote. But, I think you do raise a good point that there needs to be collaboration in order for the limited resources that we have to be able to to solve these much broader problems. And some of them they're not solvable with the financial means that we have here in Vermont. And you try to do your best and you try to figure out, where you can allocate funds to help the most amount of people. And I often say, unfortunately, we've perfected like buying fire trucks, and we haven't done a really good job of buying fire extinguishers. And, it seems like we wait until, like adult days, until the system basically is on the edge of collapse. And then we dump a whole bunch of money into it, and we spend a lot of time trying to figure out, well, how to get there. And I think it really comes down to the fact that, this is a citizen legislature trying to solve really complex issues around humans. And it's why I serve. I enjoy trying to think of this, and it's not cut and dry. And there is, so there's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, and I want to add one thing, and then I see that Mary's hand is up, and I know it's 9:52, so I want to make sure that we have space for that last question. I do want to say, and this isn't, for what it's worth, Diana, from my perspective, people sharing their experience in this space does not feel like an island, in the sense that this is really helpful for me. And, if you don't mind sharing, so then, I took sort of some of Diana's thoughts from last time and connected with some legislators that I am close with, who I know are really passionate about looking at EMS systems across Vermont, and how do we make sure that we have regional EMS systems that are effective across Vermont, and trying to get Diana connected, to those folks so that she can share her expertise with them as they're considering policy approaches. And so I think, we're all trying to do like semi-impossible tasks, but I think this is what we can just try to keep doing, is just trying to find mechanisms of sharing knowledge and information, and trying to get folks at the table who have lived experience with the work, and just keep trying to push at it. So I'm gonna stop there for a second and turn it over to Mary, if you're here with us and you want to ask your question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going to go completely off topic onto something else. So if Anne, you wanted to get into the discussion that's going on, feel free. I can wait if that's.
Yes, this is pertinent to what's going on. I get the sense that the citizens are much more divided and unaware of what people are doing than the people who are actually doing the work. I sense that our Congress, state Congress works pretty well together and shares ideas and works across the aisle. But I think we who aren't part of that, this is very helpful. What you're doing here, we get a look into how people are working together. But I think most people don't get that. And they don't go to Montpelier and watch, and they don't know how people are working together, and that this is really happening. And so they're more in tune to the divided media, the media that's divided along parties. And I think that's where the problem is more coming from, not from the legislature.
Thank you for those comments. I would agree that I think we work really hard to try to come to consensus, and sometimes part of what that means is things move slower than folks would like them to, because it takes a while to come to consensus on some of these really challenging issues.
And I can tell you, most bills come out of the Human Services Committee unanimous. I mean, like, we try to look at all sides. So we have an independent, a progressive, 3 Republicans, and 5 Democrats. And but we all work together. We're all talking about these bigger issues. Many bills come out unanimous. We try to find that middle ground.
Yeah. So it's 9:55. I'm gonna turn to Mary for the final question. Anyone who, of course, needs to jump off at 10, if we're still on, feel free to do so. But Mary, what was your question?
Can you hear me? I've got, unfortunately, a really important rugby game on in the background. So if it's too much, let me know, and I will go into the bathroom and close the door. I'm in a small space. Okay. Well, I hear it. So yeah, thank you very much for this forum. It's interesting to listen to everybody speak. Yeah, I can turn on my camera too, so you know who I am. I'm sorry about that. Thank you. Here I am. Hi. And I'm not sure this is the right forum for me to raise this. I just wanted to make sure that you, Kate, and Dan both knew that in Hyde Park, there's this little group that is caring about Japanese knotweed, and we're trying to do, last summer, we started a program to try and manage it. And there's a small group of us who are planning now for the upcoming season. And somebody pointed out, and so I wanted to make sure you knew that there were people in town who cared about that issue. I'm not asking anything from you guys at this point, because a lot of it is just work and organization and that sort of thing. But certainly if you come across anything on invasive species that you think is interesting, I'm a person who would like to know what you're finding out. But there is scope at some point for you guys to help in particular, because there are issues that just a small group of people can't deal with on their own. And it has to do with how you dispose of contaminated fill, how you deal with ditching projects and things that come out that where, the material is contaminated with knotweed. And I understand that there's, this is true of other invasive species. I just happen to have picked Japanese knotweed because it's one of the most virulent problems in the invasive species world. It's hugely visible, hugely aggressive, and very difficult to get rid of. But also, I think somebody told me that I think it's the infrastructure bill, that's the federal money, that Vermont has earmarked something like, and I'm sorry to say, it's a big number. I can't remember how big. It's either 150 or $250 million for invasive species. And I don't really know how that gets dealt with. And I know that's not going to be handled on either. something else. Sorry. I apologize. Anyway, I'll finish and
Mary.
just say I'm interested in that
Yeah.
money and what's going to happen with it, and I'll mute myself.
Good question, Mary. So I have been waging a war for 20 years at my house against knotweed. The stuff is unbelievable. It will grow on a rock. I hear you. And maybe even just looking at the policies around road ditching and, because you'll see it just spreads out. I did some river assessments for the Regional Planning Commission years ago. And if you go into like the Lamoille River, it's, not the Lamoille, sorry, the West Branch in Stowe. I mean, it starts at like the Matterhorn and it's just a continual, all the way down the river, all the way down into the village is knotweed and all the way down into the Waterbury Reservoir. And I'm sure it continues all the way to Lake Champlain. So I'm not sure what the overall goal is to use with the federal ARPA funds around, evasives. I know that there's a lot they're looking at. There's another one, the poisonous parsnip that grows on the sides of the road. They do a lot of, trying to get rid of that. Knotweed is bad news. And I'm sure the people at my house thought it was cool and planted it.
Or somebody dumped it there probably, but I'm not turning my mind to the rivers because that's too daunting. But there's a lot we can do on the roadsides and just educating people about what it is and not to dump it and that sort of thing. Anyway, it's a big, and I think it's an interesting topic, and there's a lot we can do just by everybody becoming aware of it, and many hands make light work. So if there's somebody that you can think of who is the point person for what's going to happen with that money or what they have in mind when they put that line item in the budget, I'd be interested in knowing that.
Yeah, the Ag Committee, which is probably where it will be talked about, is right across the hallway. And I talked to Representative Supernot and Representative Pearl, pretty regularly. So glad to reach out to them and find out what their thoughts are on it. And I know that there's actually even federal dollars around a AmeriCorps program. So if you really want to go for it, call me up and we'll see if we get a AmeriCorps program going to work on this. They actually have money in that. So
I was going to suggest maybe court diversion or AmeriCorps, because I've always said, get some people doing some manual labor. That's going to be good. So I don't know, Mary, court diversion. I mean, what are people doing for diversion stuff? Let's have them pull some knotweed.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And there are things where some money would be useful. Like there would be there's just a great idea for having a pilot program for where you can bring contaminated material to let it die, as opposed to, because it does die. It can be killed. It's just, you need to be smart about it. You need some equipment and you need some space where the sun can do its business. But anyway, let's talk about it sometime, Dan. I'd be interested.
I haven't been able to kill it.
No, I know.
That stuff is so bad.
Well, that's why
I'm gonna. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm finished. That's great. Thanks for the time and thanks.
I appreciate it, and I do want to honor the end of the meeting. But Mary, what I would say is also, given how much work you've put into this, if you wouldn't mind shooting us an email. Or at least me an email with some of the information, and then I can have that in communications with folks at the house as I'm just trying to reach out to people about it. Does that work for you?
Sure, I can do that. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, everyone. I think we are gonna call it a day, and hope to see you guys back next month. And we can pepper Rich Westman with all of our questions.